On this episode, when good passwords go bad, aids for ailing memory, and factoring your authentication. But before we go any further this evening, today, this afternoon, whatever it is, I have a couple of orders of business that I need to take care of. First, I owe you, my viewers, an apology. In my haste to make my last video on computer backups and device backups, I had remoted into my home computer using TeamViewer so that I could record from the office where it's a little quieter after hours than it is at home. And I had failed to disable desktop suppression. Consequently, during time periods like this where I was talking and there was nothing happening on screen, you had a black desktop to stare at and nothing else. That's just not very visually stimulating. I'm sorry for that. As you can see right now, I've got the code rain that was featured in my new introduction sequence running, and I will try to always have something visually engaging on screen from here on out, or my own ugly mug, one or the other. My second order of business, speaking of the title sequence, is my crediting of sources and my thank yous. First and foremost, Warner Brothers and the Wachowski brothers for the awesome 1990s movie The Matrix, from which I got the very concept of the code rain. I am not creative enough on my own to have come up with that. Next, speaking of the code rain. Now, there is probably a lot of better ways to do this, but what I did was created a web page locally, and I utilized for the code rain this HTML5 code snippet by creator Riaz Lasker. You can see the URL here, and I will have URLs to all of these sources in the video description so that you can access them yourself. For the title text, I found a YouTube video from YouTuber Rabbit Hedgehog who linked me to Dynamic Drive and the code snippets here. Now, I had some work to do to make it exactly what I wanted, but these were my starting points, and without these points, I never would have gotten to the final product that I had. And my sound effect came from freesound.org from user Burk. Thank you all for the work that you put in. It allowed me to create what I have created. On with the show. Tonight's episode, passwords and account security. Now, we all have passwords. We need them to log into our computers. We need them to access our social media accounts, our online banking. Our lives have come to revolve around passwords. And sadly, we don't do a very good job as people. We're not wired to remember complex things like that. Now, we might remember complex sequences and we can deal with abstract problem solving, but anything that is repetitive, anything that is just data retention and retrieval, we don't do very well with. We're just kind of not wired that way. Consequently, what a lot of us end up doing is using something that is very easy to remember or easy to figure out if you know us very well. We use things like our pets' names and our anniversaries. And once upon a time, that might have been, it was never good, but it might have been okay. Unfortunately, with today's connected world, with all of our lives laid out on social media, it's very easy to find out these things about us that were once only even partially obscure anyway. So if we're going to look at passwords, we first should look at what we should not be using for passwords. Now, I could have created a list and just put it up here for you, but instead I'm going to show you how easy it is to find passwords you should not be using. You just head to your favorite search engine. I utilize Google. And just do a search for most common passwords. Well, we'll go ahead and throw 2017 on there. And we're going to restrain that from within the last year. That way, if you're watching this in 2018, 2019, 2050, whenever, you'll just do the same thing. And we have several returns. I'm trying to find one that's more than 5 or 6. Here we go. The 25 most common passwords of 2016, posted January 17th of this year. Wait for this web page to load. I should have had this pulled up already. And we scroll on down here. List of most common passwords in 2016 and how long it would take for a password cracking software to break that. Most common passwords sequentially 1 through 6. Sequentially 1 through 9. Less than 1 second to crack these. QWERTY. Now that seems like it's a nonsense rambling, and if you have a keyboard layout that's not your standard QWERTY keyboard layout, well, that wouldn't make any sense to you. But anybody who does use a QWERTY keyboard, you look down, you need 6 characters, and it's the top left of your keyboard. It's a terrible password. Sequential 1 through 8. 6 ones. Sequential 1 through 0. And you can see over here, all of these would take a mere 25 milliseconds to crack. Now here you have QWERTY UIOP. It would take 4 months, 4 days, 7 hours, 11 minutes, and 46 seconds to brute force crack that. So that seems like, hey, we've made a huge leap up. But unfortunately, it's such a common password because it's just the top row of your keyboard. And so when hackers are utilizing password cracking software, the first thing they do is what's called a dictionary attack. And they have a list of common passwords and common English words, and the software would run through that first. So if I'm going to scroll down through the list, I'm not going to read anymore, but if you see your commonly used password or passwords in this list, you need to change them immediately. But I don't want you to just leave right now, pause the video, and go do that, because I've yet to teach you what makes a good password. Now for that, we're going to start with a relevant XKCD. Now XKCD is a webcomic. I am so thankful that all of it is licensed Creative Commons attribution. So right here, you can go to xkcd.com. You can find the original image. You can find a lot of really good webcomics. If you are interested in technology at all, you will find several of them that are quite amusing. So right here. Now this looks like a really good password. But the reason it's not is it's only got 28 bits of entropy. And down here it explains that is how difficult it is for a computer to guess. So this one really looks like it would be a good password, but it's actually easy for a computer to guess and really hard for us to remember. Now some of us have better mnemonic associations than others would get that really well. Now down here, correct horse battery staple. Especially you put the spaces between the words. You have 44 bits of entropy, which makes it a lot harder for a computer to guess, but there's a good chance you've already committed that to memory. Now that said, I personally like to use a combination of the two. I will use usually a 2-word phrase, It will be something that I find amusing or something that is important to me personally, and I will do some substitutions. Part of that is because I do typically, the mnemonics will hold up for me. If you find that they don't, you can use a method like this and be okay. But let's use a permutation calculator, and let me show you why you might want to use more than one character set. Now, a character set is simply, simple definition, it is a set of characters. But what are our sets of characters? In this instance, you have one character set. It is the A through Z lowercase character set. It consists of only 26 characters. Now in this case though, you have a very long password and spaces in there. So you actually, I apologize, you have two character sets. The more character sets we can introduce, the more entropy that the password gains. So let's look at permutations and see why that would be important. So we're going to just move this over to numbers. How many different numbers are possible? Now, in our case, we're actually not dealing with numbers, we're dealing with characters. So in the character set of lowercase plus spaces, we have 27 different characters possible. And let's use the example of a 4-character password. Now, I don't recommend a 4-character password, but that gives you 531 plus 1,000 plus different combinations that could be made out of the character set of lowercase letters plus space with a 4-character password. Now let's add into that numbers. The numbers 0 through 9, add 10 characters to that. So lowercase numbers, letters, and spaces. That bumps us from 500,000 to almost 1.9 million possible combinations with only a 4-character password. Now if we would add into that the 26 characters of adding uppercase, excuse me, well, that's going to take us up to 57 and 6 is 63 characters. Well, that bumps us then up to almost 16 million possibilities with only a 4-character password. Now finally, we're going to add in special characters, and even if we limit that to just the 10 special characters that you would get by using shift in your number keys, and there are more than that obviously, but this is just an example of why we want to add in character sets, that gives us 73 different characters, and for a 4-character password then, that puts us up to almost 28.4 million possible combinations. Now let's look at why Google and Apple and most of your accounts anymore though require you a minimum of an 8-character password. So instead of 28.4 million possibilities, if we up that requirement to 8 characters, look at the increase in possibilities. That is an increase in entropy of your password if you move to an 8-character password. So let's see how to create a password. I remember when Google first moved to an 8-character password requirement on Gmail. We were using Google Apps domain at the first school where I worked, and we started having people coming in all the time. I forgot my password again. I need you to reset it. So I understand 8 characters, it seems like a lot, and it seems like in order to hit password complexity, it's going to be really difficult. But let me show you how easy that can be to use numbers, letters, uppercase letters, special characters, and space, and come up with a password that has a lot of entropy, really hard for a computer to guess, but still really easy for a person to remember. I am something of a car guy, a little bit of a gearhead. If you're across the Atlantic and you're watching this, that'd be a petrol head. And in my garage right now, I have a Nissan S13 that makes roughly 250 wheel horsepower. Now, if you're not a gearhead, I've just spoken Greek. Obviously, this would be a terrible basis for a password for you. But this is something that obviously I find memorable because it's important to me. In and of itself, now we do have 3 different character sets here. And the fact that there's spaces and some extra information would make this a better than average password, I would say. But the problem is Nissan, well, that's a dictionary word. So we've already reduced the potential entropy by virtue of the fact that I've got a dictionary word in here. So what I would do instead is use some character substitution and add in the character sets of special characters and dashes and underscores. Dashes and underscores in a lot of the password generators I've seen are their own character set. So what I would do is I would use a capital because it is Nissan, and then we use an exclamation point that adds in special characters, an @ symbol, and an N. Now I do have to remember which characters I substituted. I would be able to remember that personally. Now if you can't, you're going to want to skip on down to our next, well, I guess you can't skip, but wait for the next example. So it's a Nissan S13 making 250 wheel horsepower. Actually, that made it a little bit harder to remember. So wheel horsepower. We'll capitalize it all. I have to remember that my first and my last 3 letters were capitals. And remember that I put an underscore into it. Now I'm confident that I could remember this password. However, don't run off and try to find me on every account known to man and use this. I have never before used this password. It is one that I've come up with simply for this video. But we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, and I might have miscounted, that might be 18 characters, no fewer than 17 characters, with a ton of entropy, several different character sets, and something that I would personally find very memorable. Now, again, if you're not a car person, you don't like Nissans, I don't know, you may not find that memorable at all. So let's look at a different method you could use. Let's look at animals doing something. Now I like to use, in this case, I like to use something funny. Again, we had the correct horse battery staple at XKCD. That's kind of funny. That makes it memorable. So let's look at a kangaroo. A kangaroo drop kick. Alright, we have uppercase, we have lowercase, we have special characters, we have a space. Now I didn't use any numbers in that, but that is 18 characters long, it has a ton of entropy, and it's easy to remember. Kangaroo dropkick. So now you have your good password, kangaroo dropkick. You're pretty confident that computers around the world are not going to figure that out. Matter of fact, if you would say, I just want to add that much more entropy, kangaroo dropkick with a 0 on the second word, and I'm going to go utilize this everywhere. Thank you, Blair, I'm tuning out. Right? Wrong. Let me paint a picture for you. You need good passwords for all of your accounts, and you need different passwords for all of your accounts. Let me start with, why do you need a good password for all of your accounts? I remember having users in the past, and this was actually around the time that Google went to the 8-character password requirement. And they said, Blair, I don't care if anybody gets in my emails. So they're going to see some spam mail and some cat pictures. Why do I care? It's not a real-world example as in I can specify date and time, but it is a real-world example in that I've seen it in the technology news that's come across. I've heard of this happening to people that I've known. You have good passwords on your bank account. You have good passwords where it's required of you, but you don't care if anybody gets into your personal email account. Well, let's just say that somebody has been following you on social media, looking at your public stuff, and just between the parts of your profile that are public and the couple of posts they can see, they've been able to narrow down what area of state and country you live in. Well, from that, they're able to get on Google and do a quick search for that area and find banks in the area. Okay. Now we're going to assume that they are in your email because you didn't care if they got into that, and they've already changed your password and they've locked you out of your email. And then from there, they go around to all of the different banks, online banking portals in your area, and they hit the forgot password link. And they put in your email address, and they get the password reset link, and they go through, and through trial and error, doing that for all of the banks in the area, they find your online bank, and they reset your password. Now, they've locked you out of your email. They've just locked you out of your bank. And what's more is, now they have the ability to spend your money. That's just one reason that you want a good password on your email. Another example, had this happen to a teacher at the first school where I worked. She came in and she said, Blair, this is weird. I got a call last night from one of my friends that said, well, are you enjoying Europe? I said, what are you talking about? They said, well, we just talked a little while ago. I know you're at home right now. You have school tomorrow. But I just got an email from you saying, help, I'm stuck in Europe. I need money. You know, scams like this happen all over. And what somebody is doing is getting into an email account and sending that out to all of their contacts, and then using that trust that somebody has for you because it's your email. And a good-hearted person that doesn't stop to check that, hasn't seen that before, panics and sends money to this person who's claiming to be you stuck overseas. Just a second reason why you want to make sure that your email accounts have a good password. Now, why do we want a different password for all of our accounts? Well, that comes in because sometimes breaches happen in spite of you having a good password. A situation like that would be, I'm going to make up a fictitious website. We've seen in the news, though, where various big companies have had breaches and lost customer account information. But we're going to make up the fictitious website shopsalot.com. Now, you have an account at shopsalot.com because you like shopping online. And I'm not at all being judgmental there. I do a large portion of my shopping online. So Shopsalot, though, their network administrator, their server administrator, did not set up their server properly, and a bad guy managed to get in and steal the database with all of their customer information. What's more, their database administrator did not have the database secured properly. So the bad guy, once he got it, he had a clear text list of everybody's usernames, email addresses, and passwords. So the first thing that any bad guy who's not just trying to sell this information is going to do is start going around to different websites where they might be able to utilize your username and password and once again become you. If you used a good password at Shops a lot, hey, great job. If you use that same good password at all of your important websites, now you see why it's a bad idea. Because the bad guy now has your online banking access, your face space, password, whatever. You see what I'm talking about. So now we get into the problem, though. Once again, humans are really bad at data retention and retrieval. Now, if you have a friend or you are a friend with a photoeidetic memory, okay, I get it, you don't. But for the rest of us, remembering a whole bunch of different passwords like those, and you need one for your work email, one for your personal email, maybe one for a throwaway email that you use when someplace requires an email address that you don't want to give them. You have one for each of your social media accounts. You have one for each different online shopping that you use. All of a sudden, we're at 50 and 100 and several hundred different passwords that we need to have. The best of us are going to break down under that. And so what we use instead is we use a password manager. Now, I don't mean the password manager that's built into your web browser. My reason for that is if you're like me and utilize a third-party browser, in this case I'm using Google Chrome, I've used Mozilla Firefox in the past. These browsers, at least used to, stored passwords in the profile folder. And so it used to be, and again, if this has changed, that's awesome. It's something I'm not willing to risk. I could grab a user's profile folder. Now you have to know where that is, but again, a Google search will reveal that. Grab a user's profile folder, copy it off to a USB drive, install the browser on another computer, copy that profile folder over, and I had a list of all of those passwords. And what's more is there was a button to click to see all of those passwords in plain text. And it also used to be that your user profiles were just contained on the computer where they resided. I do know now that Apple has iCloud Keychain, where as long as you're logged into your iCloud account, all of your iOS devices and all of your macOS devices will share passwords across them. Firefox has a sync method. Google has introduced password syncing for Chrome. So it used to be, though, that when you used a browser at a computer, all of your passwords were locked into that computer. That is changing. I am still hesitant to trust a browser's ability to keep my passwords secure. So what I use instead is a password manager. Now, a very popular one is LastPass. That is lastpass.com, if I can type. I do have a LastPass account. I don't personally use LastPass. And I believe that my reasoning for that was I did not have an offline access to my password connection without it, like on my phone and whatnot. And I won't swear to that. It's been a lot of years since I tried it and decided not to use it. And the website's not even wanting to load for me right now anyway. So we will skip away from that. What I use instead is KeepPass. KeepPass is an offline database. Now, you'll notice that I said offline. It does not, by default, have a way to synchronize your password database between your different devices. Now, what I use to get around that is I actually save the file that it creates in my Dropbox account. And you can substitute, obviously, for Dropbox, Google Drive, iCloud Drive, Microsoft OneDrive, Mega, any of the file synchronization services would suffice for this. KeepPass is written in the .NET framework, so you can utilize the portable version and use Mono in Linux, for instance, and Mac. That has been glitchy. So on Mac and on Linux, I use KeepPass XC, and you can see here that these are the other ports for other systems. And there's KeepPass XC. That one has been very solid. I used to use MacPass, but at some point, and I'm not exactly sure when, whether it was after I upgraded to Mac OS Sierra, or at some point where when Chrome updated, it no longer was matching my passwords to my websites, and it was creating a lot of extra work. So I found that KeepPass XC works very well for Linux and for Mac, and your global hotkey, which will make a lot more sense here in a minute, your global hotkey will work on both Mac OS and Linux systems. So I already have KeepPass downloaded, so I don't have to download and install it now. And when you download it and open it, you will get a window that looks like this. Now, just to save myself a lot of obfuscation details here in a little bit, I am not going to open my own personal database that I do use. Instead, I'm going to walk you through creating a new database. So, create a new database. We will just use new database because I will be deleting this momentarily. Now, you have to create a master password to access your database. KeepPass will give us a password generator, so that this will be one of the few passwords you have to create for yourself and be able to remember once you use KeepPass. But you need to make it good. If somebody were to get a hold of this database, whether sticking a thumb drive in your computer when you forgot to lock it, you do lock your computer when you walk away, don't you? Or if it is because the file synchronization service you've used has gotten breached themselves, whatever reason, if somebody gets a hold of this password, you don't want them to be able to just type in password 1 and have all of your really good passwords. So let's go ahead and use, just so you can see it, kangaroo dropkick. I like that. Sadly, I'm not going to use it because I am putting it out here for the whole world to see. Oh, and I don't want my N and my G capitalized. I would never remember that those were also capitalized. But that gives us 56 bits of entropy. Remember our correct horse battery staple was 44 bits of entropy. So we have we've managed to make a slightly better password that I personally think is still very memorable. 17 characters. You can also use a key file instead or as well. I'm not going to cover that. You can use your Windows user account. I'm not going to recommend that, by virtue of the fact that remember I said that we want to be able to use this on all of our devices. So we create our new database. Your database settings, boy, it's been a lot of years. You can go ahead and leave all of this as default, and there you go. So now you see we have some sample entries here, and he has very kindly given us a password where we can test it, or a website where we can test this. So we're going to copy our URL. I'm sorry, can't talk today. And I don't know if you noticed, but when I copied that, there was a green bar down here. So I'm going to hit Control C real quick, and you're going to see that KeepPass automatically clears the clipboard after 12 seconds. That's enough time. If you need to manually copy and paste that, you can do so, but it doesn't leave it on the clipboard indefinitely to where somebody can come up after the fact and then copy down your sensitive passwords. Okay, so but coming to this window and hitting Control C and Control V all the time really gets old. Remember me talking about my global hotkey with MacPass? Well, that's what I'm talking about. So let me pull up, because it's not going to go through TeamViewer, let me pull up a Chrome tab real quick on my local system. Get that over here. And we are going to go to that test form. And if we look at our tools, go to our options, under integration, we can see global auto type, Control, Alt, and A. So let's go in here, Control, Alt, and A. And just like that, you can see how it typed in the username, it hit tab, it typed in the password, and it hit enter. It also said Control Alt K would bring that back up. So how does it know what to do? In the in the password entry, it has an auto type sequence. And by default, you click in the username field, it will type in the username, it will hit tab, it will type in the password, and it will hit enter. And that's going to work for, I would say, 99+% of your websites. And I say that after having used KeepPass for, I think, at least 7 years. If you have a website that needs something different, they have a "what's this" link after the username, for instance, you simply add in an extra and you can use a different sequence for an individual entry. And this seems like a lot, but the fact is that you will almost never see KeepPass running. You will just hit Control Alt A and keep going on with your life. As a matter of fact, when I get a new computer, it's really awkward for the first little bit until I have KeepPass set up. And with Chrome and Firefox, sometimes you have to add in a helper in order to access KeepPass, or for KeepPass to be able to tell where you are. So let's look at the different parts of the entry so that you can tell how to use it. Your title. Now he's got sample entry. A lot of times I just use, say, google.com, amazon.com there. Your username, that's self-explanatory. Your password. Now I can hear you saying through the internet, Blair, you told me I wasn't going to have to create a bunch of passwords it's still going to be crazy. I'm going to end up with kangaroo dropkick 1, kangaroo dropkick 2. Well, that's no good. You don't want to do that either. There are some tools built in. For instance, a password generator. And in here, we can tell it how many character sets we want to use and how long we want the password to be. So let's make it 20 characters long, because that is the upper limit on a lot of websites. We want it to use uppercase, lowercase, digits. You can add in minus and underline, space, special characters, brackets. And the reason that a lot of these aren't selected by default is some of your websites won't let you use a space, for instance, in your username. Some of them only allow certain special characters. And so you can tailor it for the website that you are creating it for. So in this case, though, I'm going to say we want to give it access to all of the character sets, and you just hit OK. From there, we now have a 20 character password with 114 bits of entropy. There is no way on the earth that I would remember that password, let alone a password that looks like that for each of my different accounts. Fortunately, though, I don't have to. I tell it OK. Now you see the asterisk up here. We've made a change, so we're going to go ahead and save that. That way it synchronizes down with our Dropbox. And then we're going to come back here and we're going to hit Control-Alt-A again. And it did not change my password. Every now and again you get some glitches. Oh, wait, no, it hit tab twice because I changed it. Remember? I didn't. Let's go in here and auto type. We don't want to override the default sequence. There we go. And now it has submitted that monster password. Obviously, human error is always a factor, potentially. But it becomes super easy to have a very secure password that is different for every website that you visit regularly using KeepPass. And then utilizing the fact that I'm saving it in Dropbox, I actually have access to KeepPass on my Android phone, which is something I can show you now using my handy dandy Visor plugin. There we go. So I have access to KeepPass Droid, which is available, that's not good, in the App Store. And it's going to open my last database. And this is my personal database, obviously. And this directory, I actually utilize an application called Folder Sync so that it stays synchronized with Dropbox. So as you can see, it is my default personal password database. And then it's a little clunkier on Android because you do have to open it and copy and paste your passwords in. No more frequently than I have to do that. It is definitely worth it to me to trade off a little bit better security and having good passwords. The mini KeepPass on iOS looks very similar, works about the same way. On iOS, the one extra drawback is with Dropbox, I do not have any way to automatically synchronize the database, and so I do have to, if I know I've made changes recently, open the Dropbox app, re-download the file, and then open it in Mini KeepPass. So, we have good passwords now. We have a way to manage them and have separate passwords on all of our accounts. Is there anything left? Well, you could move on from here and be reasonably secure. But the problem will come in those data breaches we were talking about. or you may have been in a hurry when you created a new account and you used a bad password. Or you have accounts already and you're going through and you're working on changing your passwords over, but you haven't gotten around to all of them yet. What we need there is multi-factor authentication. Now that sounds really technical, kind of is. Let's break it down and digest it though. Now, what is an authentication factor? Authentication, obviously, that's easy. That is proving you are who you say you are. But what is an authentication factor then? Well, an authentication factor is the way that you prove you are who you are. The most common is the one we've talked about up to this point, and that is something you know. That is the first authentication factor, something you know. Passwords, PIN numbers, security questions are a form of something you know authentication. That's why it bothers me when I log in using my password and then the website asks me one of my security questions. That is not multiple factors. That is two of the same factor, which is still single factor authentication. The second authentication factor we'll look at is something you have. Any of my viewers who are in the military are familiar with this due to the fact that the military requires you to use your smart card, which has a SIM card built into it. And you plug that into a smart card reader, and you have to have that as well as your username and password to access your military account. Other forms of something you have authentication are physical security tokens. It might be an NFC badge that you tap to get into your work building. That is a something you have authentication. The one that I use that is something you have authentication is a token generator. I'm going to get more in depth with that in just a moment. But first I want to discuss the final authentication factor, which is something you are. That's biometrics. There are retinal scanners, facial recognition. The one you are probably familiar with if you have a very recent smartphone would be the fingerprint scanner. In theory, something you are authentication should be the most secure. In practice, it's still probably the most secure, but it's not as secure as it could be. And the reason for that is biometric scanner manufacturers have to balance security with usability. The most secure fingerprint scanner in the world would be a hassle to use because if you've been working out and you've sweat a lot recently, or you've been in the pool or in the bathtub or shower, your pruny finger would not authenticate because that fingerprint's not going to match close enough. The other end of that, though, would be a fingerprint scanner that's so forgiving that you could almost use a photocopy of a fingerprint. An example of that is the old facial recognition in Android would unlock a phone if you had a photograph of the user's face. So we've got to strike a good balance between usability and security. But what I do want to discuss right now, though, is the combination of multi-factor authentication using a password, which most of your websites are going to require, and Google Authenticator, which I have installed on my phone. So I'll just pull up Google Authenticator here. And you can see I have all of these 6-digit numbers, and they have an expiration timer going down here. I'm going to let this expire so you can see that they all cycle. And so when you've activated two-factor authentication on your account, and this gives us a listing of several popular accounts that have enabled two-factor authentication. When you log in with your password, it will then say, please give me the number currently being generated by your authentication app. It won't say that exactly, it'll be some method of that. So I log in, for instance, to Google on a new device, and then I pull out my smartphone and I plug this in. You may have also seen something similar with SMS authentication. You'll log in and they will text you a code. PayPal does that. The same kind of concept. So, we have now looked at bad passwords, good passwords, managing passwords, and multi-factor authentication. So, you are now prepared to go forth and start getting rid of your bad passwords and replacing them with good passwords. But really quickly, before you go, don't forget to subscribe to my channel. I have a lot of other tech support and cybersecurity videos in the works. I believe next I'm going to be looking at network web filtering. I've got some product reviews in the works. A lot of other things. I'm also counting on you guys to give me comments and tell me the videos that you want to see for your specific tech support needs. If you haven't subscribed, you won't know when I've got those videos uploaded. Also, if you want to show me some financial appreciation for my effort, you see up on screen and in the video description my Ethereum and Bitcoin wallets. If you want to buy me a coffee to say thank you, that's the best way to do that keeps both of us anonymous on this crazy World Wide Web. Alright, well that's it for this episode. Thank you for watching. I'll see you next time. Until then, have a great day, weekend, night, holiday, whatever it is, have a good one.